Now, since we're going to be talking about China, I thought a small introduction of the experience I had living and starting a business in China would give some credence to what I say. Back in 2008 and 9, I was working with Dow Energy, Dow Nengyuan, which was an algae biodiesel company, and we were trying to drive down installation costs by using a modular bag system that floated on fish farm water surfaces, not using land. After that chapter ended in China, I was still in Asia, so I was brought on as a consultant in Myanmar to facilitate funding for an algae spirulina farm that also encompassed rural development and how the farmers could use some simple machinery to move a more valuable product either to the river for transport or up to the rail lines. That in turn led me to OGS Coffee in the Shan State exporting. That's me on the right there. And that's how the Adapt 2030 channel started, when I started to see all these cold weather losses in Myanmar in the coffee plantations. Now let's talk about the food price rise timeline and how this cryptocurrency is going to replace our current economic system as food prices get so expensive that the rest of the economy crashes. And since the fiat currencies of the world will have no confidence behind them, we'll need to move to a different system, specifically blockchain, to buy, sell, and trade on a global level or international, because nobody will trust letters of credit. Probably in around 2018 at the end or 2019, you'll start to see some real effects into the global economy. Now, there's been a lot of talk about ACC Chain these last couple of days. So since I do read some Chinese and I speak Chinese, I actually went into not only the English version of their chart, but also the Chinese end of it with my friend. I wanted to get into a real deep explanation of what ACC Chain is. It's actually called the Asset Collection Chain. The logo is pretty interesting, and there's a lot of tie-ins with this Economist cover from 1988 about get ready for a world currency. And when we look at the current logo of ACC compared to the head of the eagle, there's some interesting correlation. So then what I did is I took that logo, I inverted it, and then cropped it to get a mirror image. And on the bottom there, I'll let you draw your own conclusion if you consider that something similar to what the logo would be on the coin from 1988. Also, the trust machine. When you see this Bitcoin spinning around the world in a mechanized fashion as a bicycle gear hub, if you will. Another interesting point was when I was inverting and mirror those, I couldn't get that mirror effect without leaving the dot in the center there. I'll let you draw your own conclusions on the symbology associated with this logo. Now, the whole purpose of this video was about the cryptocurrency market capitalization increasing lockstep with the grand solar minimum intensification. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the grand solar minimum, hold on just a minute. I'll explain that in great detail in part 2. But smart contracts are going to be the wave of the future, guaranteed. That's why I am so into it right now. I am actually studying Solidity, how to program for specifically agricultural smart contracts. And as with everything, it's a continual learning phase. This is running off of Ethereum. And if you want to learn more, you can go to the Ethereum developers community to learn a little more about Solidity. And the smart contract is a one-size-fits-all. It can really take place of any types of insurance premiums, financial derivatives, delivery contracts, property law, credit, financial services, legal processes, even some crowdfunding involved in that. Now, as the confidence of our fiat system collapses along with the real economy as people spend double or triple on food, there's going to be a lack of confidence in getting paid when you're shipping something internationally. So what's going to happen is there's going to be a swift move over into these types of blockchain contracts that are going to be on-chain assets. And again, this is the whole thing about digitizing a commodity. You predefine the contract, you enter your parameters, the fields, and then the event that happens, whether it's delivered, not delivered, moisture content, tonnage, insect damage, there's just a whole bunch of different fields to enter there. This is held until the terms of the contract are validated when the conditions are met, and then it's settled. And what I like so much about these smart contracts is the scam out in Asia is once you send something over, let's say a break-bark cargo, 60,000 tons, could be iron ore, it could be wheat, it could be corn, anything. They'll refuse delivery at port and they'll say, no, we don't want it. Take it back. But you're out running 45,000 US dollars a day to keep that ship anchored. Well, if you're going to write this contract so that if they refuse delivery and all of the event triggers are validated, that wheat is the proper moisture content, that wheat is the correct variety of wheat, the tonnage is correct. And if the purchaser refuses delivery, which they do now a lot to try to drive down price, that executes out in a settlement back to the seller, which will absolutely stop that in its tracks, this game that they play out here routinely of refusing shipments. And this is so correct here. Supply chains are hampered by paper-based systems. These letters of credit are archaic. Moving over to the smart contract, especially when a global financial collapse is happening, guarantees a specific set of outcomes regardless of the underlying asset that you're trading in, whether it be Bitcoin, Ethereum, Steam, Ripple. I don't care what you're going to use as your underlier, but you can still be paid in that, and we don't even have to worry about global fiat issued currency that's paper any longer. We can just move it straight over, and that can be also traded on. And this is where ACC Chain tokens come in. I want to talk about the settlement instruments here, but how they're using underlying asset is T. So you've heard about this and what happened with this T deal. It's been all over the internet. A lot of people talking about they digitize T, and then they just leave the story at the end and they don't show you. So Fenghui International Finance, what they did was they set up a series of the Daguan Ts. They have Daguan Qianshui and Daguan Jiaomu, and they have Daguan Jingong. Now, each one of these types of T was also issued with its own individual coin, which was then put out for an ICO. So the Daguan series, this is a special type of T called Pu'er, and it's a time-stamped 2008 Yunnan province T in a warehouse, validated, and the coin's out, and whoever bought in this coin actually owns part of that T. And this second type of Pu'er T, which is in Bingdao Laozhai area in Yunnan province also, this is a separate type of T with its own coin issued for this lot, if you will. And then we have the third type of Pu'er, 2009 Jingong, and all they're doing is really just going through and issuing a regional token for each one of these. So this is the breakdown here of TTT wine. So Huayang Capital, they did with this type of liquor, Xiaohongliang Kunzi, and they called it the Jiang coin. Just specifically a token issued by Huayang for this batch lot of their liquor. And as I say, follow the money. So we start tracing back in to see Huayang blockchain is funded by which venture capital fund and which incubator inside China. Now here's where it got gray and dicey in a lot of the videos that I'd seen over the last 3 days. They didn't go so deeply into what the NPC tokens are. Now the NPC is actually a node primary coin. So this is a base underlying asset that can be used to transfer into other types of coins that are issued inside these digitized either T lots or alcohol lots or real estate that's coming up. So basically it's a third-party storage, authenticated, evaluated, confirmed asset pack, if you will. So they bundled it into something called NPC. But prior to that, what they had created was something called the PEB. It's a different kind of coin which had a digital standard token associated with it as well on a single lot of Tibetan tea. Now they tried to couple NEC and PEB together, but since that time and those ICOs that have run, they've decoupled that. These are what the coins look like. Right side is NPC. Real estate token, RET, we'll come back to that because they did do a real estate run as well on an ICO for real estate in Texas. But I downloaded the NPC white paper, and this node primary coin is supposed to be the supernode home currency inside the ACChain. It's a complete asset digitalization tool. Now this can be used to transition or transfer traditional assets into blockchain. Now I'll get into this in a moment. It's not about buy, sell, trade. This is about movement of your digital currency into other investment plays across this space that's being evolved at the moment, ACChain. And if we take a look at the NPC token offerings and ICO participants, the trade areas and which regional exchanges these coins are offered on, The one thing you need to get to is actually the underlying asset value. So if we come back over, this is the node primary coin ICO. So if we come all the way over to the right side, you see PEB. And at the time of this ICO, it was 1 equaled 1. And then we move over to 3.5 node primary coins equals 1 ACChain coin. And then they went with that to 1,300 NPC equals 1 Ethereum. And then it was 15,000 NPC equaled 1 Bitcoin. So I started to trace down where these coins were traded over here in Asia and where the ACC is being offered. Can you trace the money? Where is it coming from? Where is it going to? So the first stop is Loicoin. And you notice right away PEB and ACChain are on the Korean exchange. This is all pegged to the Korean won. So ACChain currently at 350 won to the dollar is about 30 cents US or so. But the PEB has been discontinued and it's so low value right now anyway that they've pretty much gone away with this. Then I also found it listed over in Japan in NIRA-X. But they're at a slightly higher price because it's 47 yen, which is creeping toward 40 cents. Now the original thing that kicked this all off was the Ninghong Ganhong tea. And I did actually jump into the guidebook and the product traceability, which brought me to that first image that you saw there of the tea. Everything is really well done and all the images are there so you can compare tea lots and numbers. The Jiangxi Ninghong group was responsible for putting this very first one together. I think they were just testing the water to see what would happen and when they issued these coins, if anybody would take it. ICO, just for that first tea run, was pushing 40 million US. They've had several since that have raised 15 billion US dollars. It's absolutely a power structure. There's one that's issuing 3 below. There's nothing that's decentralized. There is a flow through to a single issuer that controls the coins below it. And as we look through the international token issuing plan, all of these other 13 underliers here are going to be issued out with coins for an ICO for whatever commodity, equity, or application that it's going to be. But each one of them will be issued in its own coin. And notice that the US Maldives Islands with an equity and a commodity travel coin. And when we talk about large amounts of cash coming in on these ICOs over here through this ACChain, this is billions of dollars here that came through with 345 investors. Okay, you need government approval to do something like that. They're not running this type of money without absolute government intervention, guidance, and approval. And they also put out a news release that the PEB and the NPC are no longer coupled. So when you look on the WanBi Exchange, you can find Ant shares are still there, but they're also reorganizing into the NEO coin. One interesting one, Quantum. Keep that in mind as we come back through these news releases here. The next NPC launch was on WanBi. Pricing there, these are Chinese yuan, so it's about 6.1 yuan to the dollar. So 0.22 of that, it brings it down just into the cents, US cents for one token there. And you can see the volatility isn't as high as what would be coming through Poloniex or Bittrex or something. There's very little movement considering this is a week run here, 8-hour candlesticks. Look at some of the other tokens often on WanBi. Now please remember, red means positive in Chinese culture, so that 7.5%, that's not a negative, that's a gain for the day. Green is negative. Now back to this whole thing about it requires government approval. And you know, when I was working on that algae biodiesel, we had approval from the Sichuan government and the Chengdu government. But when we started to produce oil over there from algae, we were closed down because it was not approval from the national government. And we're like, wait, we had a written contract with a joint venture partner from the provincial government in Sichuan. And that was overridden by the national government. So when it comes down to this level where they're bringing in billions of US dollars, they're absolutely working with the Chinese government. Now here's the Chinese government's 5-year blockchain plan to actively push forward. There's a method behind the madness. And notice the time, 2016 to 2020, the PBOC is actually going to issue its own coin. So let's go right back to the ACChain, operated by Guiyang Blockchain Financial Company. And when you get into the white paper of ACChain, they break it down into 3 different uses for this underlying object. First one is an equity token. Second one is an application token. It's something like gas for Ether. And then the third one is the commodity token. Now, the internet rumors right now are that these are going to be linked to special drawing rights coin issued off the IMF or the Bank for International Settlements. In my research, I really didn't find anything like that, but knowing China the way I do, they would definitely not be advertising. They would use a third-party intermediary to get everything set up so there would be no attention drawn to that. They will not announce this until it's already up and running, and then they'll announce. There's no way they're going to broadcast their move before this is ready to go. So when you get into all this talk about the supernodes, and then in small print, more supernodes are being discovered. And I'll tell you the next one that's being discovered. It's up in Canada right now. Bit wider out here for you so you can really dig in and take a look at the International Node Exchange. These digital token SDR, international node tokens, can be settled in legal currency. They call it actually SDR digital currency, like special drawing rights. And again, it's a hierarchical chain. There's no decentralization involved in this at all. Each global node will then be established a general ledger token, a GLT for regional circulation, thus subservient to the international node. They have some interesting graphics in the white paper. I've linked everything below so you can backtrack and trace all this down yourself. But it looks like as moving forward, as commodities get digitized inside China, they're going to be using 3 underlying assets. They're going to be using Bitcoin, Ethereum, and this new ACChain. If it does happen to be pegged somehow to the special drawing rights in IMF and BIS, these are the 3 that are going to move forward. Again, China does not broadcast its moves moving forward. They are secretive until everything is said, and they try to take you by surprise in a chess move. Just the way it is. And then when we look at other types of digitization of assets, let's look at the SRT coin here. This is a U.S. real estate project in Dallas, Texas. This is a smart contract for real estate, literally. Now, BlockGeeks already did a really in-depth post on what smart contracts are and how they work. I encourage you to check out their work. And thank you guys over there at BlockGeeks for putting all this together. And it's moving in the exact same way. And all we need to do, instead of digitized currency, we just need to change that to ACChain or SRT. And it's the exact same thing happening right now. It's a U.S. real estate project token. And this industry token that was put out for the ICO is labeled RET, Real Estate Token. How original. Visual graphic form. Now, the commercial white paper, which I also downloaded and looked at, classifies RETs as digital asset SDR, special drawing rights, formed by Bitcoin, Ethereum, ACC, and other mainstream digital assets. And at the time of this video, they still haven't fulfilled their ICO funding goals. They've only hit about 1 million of these 50 million SRTs on the ICO goal. How it works is something like this. It's a circulating method. Take a step back to the NPC node primary coin again. These seem to be interchangeable in usability within all these ICOs that the same groups are offering on these assets. That's a key thing to keep in mind as well. But these real estate tokens are broken down into region A, B, C, and D. There's projects going on in Canada as well as the United States. And when taking a look into something like this asset play, exit strategy, you better have one. So I started to look into how can you exit out holding these RET coins. I want to draw your attention down to number 3. All right, number 1 is the regular trading platforms. Number 2 is digital assets. That's fine. We're familiar with those. But here's where it gets into the interesting zone. Once these ICOs are set up, now currently there's only about 30 or 40 of these between the companies that are operating ACC, RET, SRT, and NPC coins. What appears to be happening is the exit strategy allows you to switch assets of either a product or a service or a commodity of equal value within their group of investments that are linked together through all these ICOs and the underlying asset of the commodity or the real estate or the liquor or the tea itself. So if you want to exit out of this real estate play in America, you're able to convert those coins right over into something perhaps on the pu'er tea and one of the Fenghui offerings. So you don't actually have to exit out, convert, pay the fees, and then buy back in. You can just slide sideways on that to exit out your position, which I find incredibly interesting. If ACC is already getting to this level where they're able to move from real estate into liquor, into tea, think about this. If you can digitize assets in a different country, you never have to take ownership of that. That's not the point. Let's say you get that house in Dallas, Texas on the ranch that they're buying. The person in China or Asia or wherever you're buying this from has no intention of ever taking delivery or living in that house. They're just using it as an investment vehicle. They're hoping for an increase in value. And when it does, they're going to slide the coin over to the pu'er cha, which continues to increase like fine wine does. These teas have a year to them as well. They increase in value. If you had some pu'er cha from 1997, it's worth its weight in gold now. So you could just jump in between these different investments. So imagine if we can digitize forests, real estate, your labor. How much are you worth? Do you have a master's degree? I can digitize you. What about farm animals? What about farmland? What about fish? What about everything that can be digitized at this point? And my whole thing is about when we get slammed on the economy through this grand solar minimum, they're going to start digitizing food. And they're going to want to take physical delivery of that. But at the point of buy, sell, trade on the digital asset itself, everything in the world can be digitized. You can digitize a single tree and buy, sell, and trade it between these different commodity asset classes that you can slide sideways into if you're in the same group. Now here's the next thing to take note of. Over on WanBi, they also have corn coin, YMC, Yumi, which is the name for corn in Chinese. If they're already trading on the Yumi coin, or the corn coin, they're already starting to digitize the first agricultural commodity assets right here. So Yumi coin currently is really low price. Now I don't know what it's based on. I can't find where the ICO was, who issued this. It's trading on WanBi, but I don't know the underlier, who's supplying the corn for this contract or this coin to be issued. But it's trading. And when you think about digitizing a harvest from a country, when food gets incredibly expensive, this is the only way it's going to move. The cash you know now will no longer be valid. Nobody will trust it. They're going to move over into the blockchain. So hey, I just created my US wheat coin 2019. That contract owner, that's my Bitcoin address. I can create my own contract for 60,000 tons of US durum wheat in the 2019 season with 10% moisture, coming out of Kansas. If they can do it, anybody can do it. If you're running Solidity, you can actually create this. Now you start to see moving forward where it's going. So in my day living in China, I did a little due diligence over there, tracing down some companies. So here we go. I just put that all back into practice again. ACChain, how findable are they on the social net inside China that runs parallel to everything outside China? So obviously if you're looking for something on YouTube, you're not going to find it because YouTube's banned in China. You're going to have to go to Youku or Tudo to look for something like this. So I looked up and they have 197 subscribers on a global ICO where it's supposed to be special drawing rights connected to the IMF and the Bank for International Settlements. And I thought, okay, it's YouTube. Perhaps they're difficult to find. So I started running some searches in Chinese, those search terms down there with Tudo and ACChain. I found one video with 1,200 views 3 months ago. That's it. Talk about flying under the radar. So far under the radar, they're almost unfindable. That is on purpose. That is not that, whoa, they have no exposure. They've gone out of their way to have no exposure. That is the difference. And when you start seeing billboards like this, the world currency, and you know the People's Bank of China is developing their own blockchain to issue their own new digital currency issued from China for world settlement, it makes you wonder. Now, the last piece of the puzzle has to be how to facilitate all these transactions. If they're actually going to go global and try to do what all of our modern banking systems do, including BIS and the IMF, they're going to have an enormous network. Enter quantum communications. Now, this is supposedly uncrackable. Absolutely 100% secure communication systems between transmitter, receiver, the quantum key, downstream, upstream, whatever way you're looking at it. We don't even have anything in the United States like this at the level yet. And China's already launching quantum communication satellites. They're actually using entangled photon beams to transmit the information. Now, as with everything on the planet, whoever puts down the first fiber optic cables, telephone cables, electric cables, whatever it is, whoever puts that hard infrastructure in place claims that. And here we go. By the end of August 2017, the Quantum Communications Network will be up and running and operational. It is the essential step toward global scale quantum internet. If you're going to go on a global level with BIS, you're going to need this not only for security, but actual reach and not depending on electrical grids or infrastructure within a country. We're talking about satellite beaming signals. NEO has been rebranded from AntShares. And somehow NEO is now connected with the PBOC developing an Ethereum-based digital currency to replace the yuan. So that comes right back with that government approval process being required. So the Chinese government's not on top of any of this. Visibly, they're not on the table. They are under the table, allowing everybody else to run with this. And they are so silent right now on what's happening. The way they're setting up the Chinese blockchain with the new yuan replacement and NEO's platform, it all has to run through a centralized platform. There's no way to connect to it as a third party side chain. You have to connect through their centralized platform, which means it's centralized. It's not decentralized. It's not running without approval or authority from some platform higher up the chain. Digital image here of what it's supposed to go out with the quantum network globally. That circle is over China first. The periphery areas are going to be over in Japan, Taiwan, Singapore, India. And just even as early as April, you could have picked up NEO for cents, literally cents. And now it's at $47. My personal feeling is with all the push behind and all this fervor from the government approval of NEO, it's going to just keep going up in China. And ACChain.org also has some blockchain news on there. And I'm going to have to agree with this here. The global blockchain innovations, the U.S. lags. Europe and China lead. The U.S. is so far behind. Really, they're a decade behind on what's going on. They're going to be left in the dust, literally. Turning into an impoverished nation. If you control the currency and you can control who buys, sells, trades, this takes us into a whole nother realm. Need to catch up on this. Now you might say, well, how is the Chinese government going to get everybody into a centralized platform? Well, they already are. It's called Tencent. And if you're not familiar with Tencent, it links over 200 social media, fintech, bill payment, group buys, messaging services into its network. You log into one platform and you can access over 200 separate platforms which we need to individually log into. WeChat's part of their platform. And then inside WeChat itself, you can do all these different services or functions. And the global expansion for WeChat itself, notice mainly focused on Asia, but it's also going to be down in South Africa, South America, Mexico. This is all fintech and global payments. Active users of WeChat Pay and QQ Wallet in China. If you're unfamiliar with these payment systems and how people just swipe QR codes to buy like a stick of gum, they're so familiar with it and it's so comfortable to use. This system now scares most people in the US. Chinese are early adopters and everybody accepts it everywhere. And Alipay, comprising almost 50% of third-party online payment systems, And not only with the WeChat and all the fintech with Alipay going on, but anything in the Taobao, which is like the eBay, you can buy, sell, trade there, inside Weibo with all the blogs. Then you get into QQ with the messaging. It's all connected through Tencent. And then Baidu, which is the search engine, which is very similar to what Google would be, it's also tied in. So everything is at a central node point anyway. They're not trying to reteach anybody the wheel. They've already set it up as such. So all they do is slide systems. So instead of using Chinese yuan, they're just going to switch instantly over to the digital new yuan issued by the PBOC, and it's just game on. And nobody even blinked an eye. They're that comfortable with it. Mobile payment system, same thing. It's just up, 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 up. Although the growth rate has decreased, but the amount of users keeps increasing. You can only saturate a market. There's 1.4 billion people in China. And if we just go layer on top of layer on top of layer of digital video sharing, messaging, social networking, blogging, photo sharing, online sales platforms, Tencent. So let's follow the money over to Canada. ACChain going over to Altcoin Exchange, listing tomorrow, as a matter of fact, on Altcoin. They call it the NASDAQ of global blockchain assets. They only have about 7 listings on there right now. But if you find the parent company of Altcoin, it traces to Cascadia Consumer Electronics Corp. So I try to find some of their board members and then link them back to any of the ACChain. Was unsuccessful doing that. Also, looking through their spelling mistakes. If you're going to talk about joining an ICO instruction with a T, you got to ask yourself, this is not a native speaker putting this together. This is a Chinese-run site. And the eQuant ICO that's coming out, there's a spelling mistake in assets. It's aseta. I don't know if maybe it's a Spanish or a Portuguese word that they're putting in there. Not sure. So out of all of that you've seen, and knowing the Chinese People's Bank of China involvement and them coming out and working with NEO and quantum communications, and literally how everything is entangled in this whole web in the cryptocurrency space, I'll let you draw your own conclusion. I'm just bringing the information to you. Thanks for watching. Hope you got something out of the video. Our lives are going to be so drastically different, so very, very different from this point forward. I hope you can adapt to change, because that's all it's going to be from this point forward, is changing. Non-stop, continuous, metamorphic, ground-shaking, inconceivable changes. And you're going to have to roll with it. And I hope this gives you a head start of where it's going, so you can position yourself correctly to benefit off this. You should be thriving during this time. You should not be a pauper at the end of this time. With this information that you just watched this video, you need to be coming out of the backside of this a multimillionaire and helping others along the way too. That's the whole point. Just don't go in it all greedy and try to get as much as you can and leave everybody in the dust. Bring people along with you. Help people along the way. There's going to be a lot of mental breakdowns during this time. There's going to be such a high suicide rate during this time. You need to explain to people what's going on, that it cycles in the sun, not to worry about their wealth. There's other ways to preserve wealth, and not to worry about the food. You can grow your own food. You can work with your community. You know it's coming, so you can start to prepare right now in advance for all these changes. And on a last note, with the world in such disarray right now economically, and you can see governments spending so carelessly and recklessly, and you look at it and go, they're using no common sense. It's impossible what they're doing. How do they expect to pay anything back? They never will. They won't. They don't intend to. And all your retirement savings that's locked up into this system is absolutely going to vanish. And speaking of those using digital platforms, thank you so much, Daniel, Kristen, and Tom, for your contributions through paypal.me/adapt2030. I've also listed my cryptocurrency deposit addresses below, so if you feel you found this video informative in some way that can help you benefit through the future, please consider Patreon or a cryptocurrency deposit.